So yes, today we're here to talk about the Right Review tool. First, just going to go over some webinar objectives. So the first is to describe how and when to use the Right Review tool, and I'll go through some worked examples a little later in the presentation. I'm also going to explain the development and evolution of the Right Review tool. And finally, which is the most exciting part of this, I think, is to preview the new update of the Right Review tool, also known as Right Review 3.0. This is the first time anyone outside of our team is going to have a chance to look at the tool, so very excited to share that all with you. I just wanted to mention that I'll be sharing the development website, which is proprietary, so I kindly ask that you do not take screenshots of the tool or try to access the development website. However, we will share the tool link with everyone who participated today once the update has been officially released. So thank you in advance. Before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the Right Review team. So everyone that you see on the slide, it truly was a team effort, and Dr. Andrea Trico is the named principal investigator for this project. To kick off the presentation, I thought we'd start off with some poll questions, just to get a sense of everyone's experience with evidence synthesis. And so I'm going to launch the poll. Just give me one moment. Okay, so it should pop up. So the first question is, have you ever been involved in evidence synthesis before? The second question is, if you have, how did you decide what evidence synthesis method to use? And if none of the choices are on the screen, feel free to put some in the chat as well. And the last question is, how often have you used Right Review? So we'll give everyone a moment to do that. Lots of answers are trickling in. Thank you so much for your participation. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds before I end the poll. Okay, I think most people have responded, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. All right, so a good amount of you have actually done an evidence synthesis before, which is great. Moving on to the second question, we can see there's actually a bit of variance in how people approach deciding to use an evidence synthesis method. And quite a few of you have never used the tool, so this is very exciting. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the poll. Okay. And this is actually great because this leads into nicely into why we actually developed the Right Review tool. So we recognize that there are lots of evidence synthesis methods out there, and it can be challenging and overwhelming to decide which one to use. So we set out to simplify this selection process by developing a tool that was user-friendly and easy to use. So what exactly is Right Review? It is an open access living web-based decision support tool. And what I mean by living is that it has iteratively been updated to evolve with the evidence synthesis field. The purpose is to help users select which evidence synthesis methods would be appropriate for their research question, and the process is fairly simple. Users answer a series of simple questions, and then the tool will generate some recommended methods along with accompanying guidance and examples all in one convenient place. In terms of the audience for this tool, it really is anyone interested in conducting an evidence synthesis, especially those who are undertaking a review for the first time or those who are unfamiliar with a range of evidence synthesis methods. So who should use the Right Review tool? Or sorry, when should you use the Right Review tool? This is what kind of obvious if you plan to conduct an evidence synthesis, if you are unsure of or want to verify which method to use, if you want to review potential methods for evidence synthesis, and if you want to view key conduct and reporting guidance and descriptions or examples of different evidence synthesis methods. For these last 2 points, there's actually a tab in the tool that lists all of the included review types and the accompanying guidance, descriptions, and open access examples. And I'll show you exactly where that is later in the presentation. So how did we develop Right Review? There have been 3 versions of the tool since we initially launched in July 2019. So the first version was our pilot released in 2019, and it contained only quantitative evidence synthesis methods. We had one set of questions and answers, and there were about 26 evidence synthesis methods included in the tool. And then in 2022, we launched our 2.0 version, which is the current version of the tool that you see today, and we added qualitative evidence synthesis methods. We now have 2 sets of questions and answers, and there are 41 evidence synthesis methods included in the tool. And now in our 3.0 version, which is the upcoming update that will be released this year, it's an integration of the quantitative and qualitative branches of the tool. So now we're back to one set of questions and answers, and we have over 100 evidence synthesis methods included in the tool. This includes combinations of different methods and those that are theoretically possible. And I'll explain a little bit later what that means. Across all of the different updates, there were 4 distinct development phases that we went through. The first was designing the tool. The second was conducting usability testing. The third was disseminating the tool. And the fourth was evaluation. I just wanted to note that the data on our evaluation that I'll be sharing today was based on the data for the pilot version. So it only contained quantitative methods. And at that point, it had been disseminated for over a year. However, we are continuing to evaluate the tool more informally through a voluntary feedback survey. All right, and I will be briefly describing each of these phases in the subsequent slides, focusing more on the current version of the tool and the upcoming update. And before I dive into that, I just wanted to mention that we have 2 publications related to the tool. The first is in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology, and this describes how the pilot and current versions of the tool were developed and evaluated. And the second paper, also published in JC, details the Delphi process, which informed the upcoming update of the tool. Okay, so before diving into the details, I wanted to provide an overview of the architecture of the tool, which was designed as a simple expert system, as you can see here on the screen. In the current version of the tool, there are 4 main components. The first is the inputs. So the inputs are what the users actually put into the tool, so their answers. And the inputs are stratified according to whether users wish to synthesize findings from quantitative or qualitative studies. So for reviews of quantitative studies, users are required to complete 5 questions and 10 questions for qualitative studies. The inference engine matches the inputs to the attributes of the included evidence synthesis methods to generate methodological recommendations. And this is done using a decision tree for the quantitative studies and a scoring scheme for qualitative studies. We also have the knowledge base, and this is what informs the inference engine and is composed of 6 sources: the tool's questions and answers, the explanation and elaboration documents, key conduct and reporting guidance, a glossary of terms, and some methodology examples. And then finally, we have our output. So all of this culminates into what the tool actually presents, which is the suggested evidence synthesis methods along with related conduct and reporting guidance. The architecture of the tool for the upcoming update of the tool looks pretty similar. We still have the 4 main components, but what drives the inputs and the inference engine are different. So you can see here that no stratification is required, as there's only one set of questions that users complete. And the inference engine, it still matches the inputs with attributes of the evidence synthesis methods, but this is derived from a series of pathways that are constructed as mini decision trees. I'm now going to describe how we designed the current version of the tool in a little bit more detail. So focusing first on the quantitative studies, the questions were specifically informed by multiple sources. So the first was a framework of different evidence synthesis types by Gao and colleagues. The framework classifies different evidence synthesis types along 3 dimensions. The first is the goal or objective. The second is the structure and components. And the third is the extent of the work required to address the research question. And so this really provides a description of how reviews may differ and why across these three dimensions. The questions were also informed by methods guidance, so the Joanna Briggs Institute, Equator Network, and Cochrane Handbook for Systematic Reviews, also evidence synthesis expertise among our team members. The question type is multiple choice with users selecting only one answer. And the logic of the tool was designed using a decision tree. So this is really how the back end of the tool works. You can see here that the tree node represents the question in the tool. The branch represents the user's answer to the question. And the leaf node represents the recommended method, which you can see in the slide is in this case a scoping review. Moving on to the qualitative side, the questions were informed by two reviews. The first, a scoping review by Kastner and colleagues, and a structured methodology review by Booth and colleagues, as well as methods guidance, including guidance on choosing qualitative evidence synthesis methods and seminal methodological papers, as well as qualitative evidence synthesis expertise among our team members. The question type in this case is a combination of multiple choice, so selecting only one response, and selecting all that apply. So the logic was a little bit different. We use a scoring scheme, and this measures the extent to which users' responses match the attributes of the different evidence synthesis methods. So in this case, if it's a single response question, the answer would receive a score of 1 for an exact match and a 0 for a non-match. For multiple responses, partial scores are assigned by comparing user responses with expected answers. And then the total score is a sum of the scores of the individual questions, and the method with the largest score is recommended. However, there are some instances where more than one evidence synthesis method is recommended, and that is because the total score was within plus or minus 0.5 of the highest score. Now I'm moving on to the upcoming update. In designing the update of the tool, we use a slightly different approach in that the questions were informed by a modify eDelphi process that aimed to update the tool and integrate the quantitative and qualitative questions into a single set of guiding questions. This Delphi was led by Dr. Barbara Klein, with whom I'd like to acknowledge for contributing to the content of the slides for this section of the presentation. So the Delphi items were generated based on the existing tool. So the tool questions, evidence synthesis definitions, and the tool outputs. There were two online rounds of the Delphi. An agreement was set at 70% a priori, which defined high agreement. Relevant knowledge users were invited to rate each item for importance or clarity. And we invited 80 participants. 24 panel members completed sections of round 1, and 12 completed all sections of round 2. In terms of the demographics of the participants, completers were mainly researchers with one patient representative, and they were very experienced in evidence synthesis and had mainly not used the tool before. After 2 rounds of the Delphi, all outstanding items were discussed by the project steering committee. And then to summarize across the Delphi rounds, 21 of 46 items reached high agreement in round 1, with 3 new items suggested from comments. This meant that 27 items were presented in round 2, with 8 agreed upon. So this left 19 items for discussion by the project steering committee, and of these 19, 10 had minor edits, 6 were disaggregated or merged, and 3 were excluded. This resulted in a final tool with 9 guiding questions, 25 review types and approaches, and 8 tool outputs. For the question type, we went back to selecting only one answer. And the logic of the tool was designed using a series of decision trees that form pathways. So now I'm moving on to the second phase, which was conducting usability testing. So we performed 3 sequential phases to refine the components of the tool, which applied to all versions of the tool. The first was phase validity. So are the questions and answers valid? Phase 2 was the logic of the tool. Do the combination of responses match with the attributes of the recommended methods? And the third phase was really about fit for purpose. Do the recommended methods meet the expectation of reviewers with expertise and experience in evidence synthesis conduct? Is the tool easy to use, and can you break the tool? And this is referred to as adversary testing. In phases 1 and 3, participants who tested the tool used case studies to review the questions and answers, tested the tool, including the adversary testing that I mentioned, using assessment forms. And in phase 2, this was mostly done by our development team. We created and tested the decision trees and scoring scheme, and then analyzed the results for discussion and modifications. Now moving on to phase 3, which was dissemination. We use conventional dissemination strategies, which included sharing announcements on internal websites, internal and external organizational newsletters, and directly emailing knowledge users within our extended networks to tell them about the tool and the updates. We also had social media campaigns on X, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky, and we plan to use similar strategies for the upcoming update of the tool. And now the final phase was evaluation. Again, the data that I'll be showing here today is based on the pilot. So the goal of the tool was to evaluate the real world use of the tool, and evaluation was led by a member of the team who was not directly involved in the tool's development. We use the re-aim framework for our evaluation, and it consists of 5 constructs. For this tool, the constructs were conceptualized in the following ways. So reach referred to the representation and number of individuals who use the tool. Effectiveness was the impact of the tool on real-world practice. Adoption was about the organizations using the tool in their setting. Implementation was how well the tool was put into real world use, and this construct was adapted to reflect the process of disseminating the tool, with the focus on developing new and leveraging existing channels to share the tool. And finally, maintenance. So this was really about sustainability of the tool and maintaining the effectiveness of outcomes. The results of our evaluation. So our data sources were an online voluntary survey, as well as analytics from X and Google. The Google Analytics were from July 8th, 2019 to October 13th, 2020. And the X Analytics were based on our 5-week campaign that began in April. So in terms of reach, as of October 2020, 4,673 users had used the tool, and this was worldwide, mostly North America, but also a good chunk in Europe as well. And as of this month, March 2025, we have approximately 70,000 users of the tool. Moving on to effectiveness, although the survey completion was low, we were still able to obtain feedback and evaluate perceived effectiveness. So all respondents found the tool was easy to use, and the majority found the tool had a clear purpose, the questions were easy to understand, and the descriptions of the evidence synthesis methods were perceived as adequate. The majority also found the explanation and elaboration guide helpful, although some did note that they hadn't noticed the explanation and elaboration guide or the tooltips. So we took that feedback and enhanced the tooltips and the explanation and elaboration document to make them more visible and to put them in a couple different places so that people could access them. And then for adoption, most users access the tool through a direct link to the tool or a referral website, such as academic library services websites. And then for implementation, this was based on our social media campaign. So it did appear to be an effective dissemination strategy. Over the 5 weeks, our 8 ex posts receive a combined 27,368 impressions, 1,286 total engagements, 599 link clicks, 218 likes, and 132 retweets. And then the last construct, maintenance, on average, approximately 236 users had accessed the tool each month over 14 months post-dissemination. And the initial dissemination during July 2019, it continued to be disseminated past that. So this led to diffusion of the tool. And we are, as I mentioned, continuing to informally evaluate the tool using a voluntary feedback survey that's embedded in the tool. And so I know that was a lot about the development, but happy to answer any questions. But now we're going to discuss the upcoming update of the tool. And I thought the best way to demonstrate how the tool works and to preview the upcoming update was to actually walk through a couple of case scenarios in real time. So a friendly reminder to please not take screenshots of the tool or try to access the development website. We will share the tool with all of you once the update has been officially released. So we're going to start off with the first case scenario. So a researcher is interested in understanding patients' attitudes toward and experiences with clinical artificial intelligence. Clinical AI is described as any software made to automate intelligent behavior in a healthcare setting for the purposes of diagnosis or treatment that might be directed towards patients, caregivers, or healthcare providers, or a combination. The researcher did not locate any existing or registered systematic reviews after an initial search of the literature. They are interested in including studies from both qualitative and quantitative primary studies. So now we're going to go into write review. Again, we're going into the development site for the purposes of previewing the tool, but the link that I have here will be the correct link when our update is officially released. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a second. And this is what the tool looks like. There will be a landing page, but for the purposes of the demonstration, we're just going to go straight to the form. But before I go through the questions using the case example, I just wanted to point out a few features of the tool. So we have an About Us section. This will include some information on the development of the tool, who our team is, and access to the papers that I shared. We have this tab. It will be renamed Evidence Synthesis Methods, but this is what I was mentioning earlier in the presentation, where we're going to house all of the included review types, as well as the accompanying guidance and examples. We also have a glossary of terms for any terms that may be unfamiliar to you, and then we have a tab for testimonials. And then in terms of the actual form, for any of you who have used Write Review before, you probably remember there's a landing page and you're directed to either select quantitative or qualitative. In this case, you'll have one button and it will lead you directly to this form. And you'll see that we, as I mentioned, we only have one set of questions and we have 9 questions in total. Before I get into the questions, I just wanted to point out 2 things. So we have the explanation and elaboration document. It is pretty lengthy, but it is comprehensive, and it will help guide you answering any of the questions and just understanding the questions and the answers. So if you click that, a PDF will pop up. And then we have these tooltip icons, which is the question mark with the blue circle. If you click on that, it will provide excerpts from the explanation and elaboration documents that will again help guide you in terms of answering the questions that we have in the form. So just to quickly run through each of the questions. So the first question is, what is your goal or objective or key contribution to knowledge by doing the review? This is a similar question to what we have in the existing tool, but you can see that there are quite a lot of different answer responses now. The second question is about whether or not you're comparing interventions or diagnostic tests. This again maybe look familiar to you if you have used the tool before. The third question is about the type of evidence you'll be using. The next question is about the type of analysis you will use or you plan to use. The next question is about whether or not your primary research question is fixed or emergent. The sixth question is about how theory or whether theory will be integrated into your work. The seventh question is about whether or not you'll have expertise in qualitative research on your team. If you have any time, resource, or cost constraints is number 8. And the last question is about whether or not you intend to continually update the review. So now that I've kind of oriented you to the form, we're going to go thinking back to our case example. We're going to work through some of the questions. So we know that we're interested in both quantitative and qualitative goals based on what I shared, and we are not planning on comparing any interventions or diagnostic tests at this point. We are specifically interested in primary studies. We are interested in, since we're looking at qualitative and quantitative data, we probably want to do a quantitative and qualitative synthesis. Our question is fixed. We have a very specific research question. At this point, there are some theories that we saw in the literature related to clinical AI, so we're going to say yes to theory. We do have qualitative research expertise. The main researcher is a qualitative evidence synthesis methodologist. Do we have time or resource constraints? We're going to say yes, this is a very timely topic, so we want to make sure we get the evidence out there. And also we anticipate that we will want to update this over time, as this is a very hot topic and we expect that more and more research is going to come out. So once you're happy with all of the answers, you can go ahead and press save. And so our suggested method was rapid living mixed methods reviews. So you'll see here, these are all your answers. You'll see your answers and what the expected answers were. So this is essentially displaying the decision tree, but just in a different format. You can view the definitions related to the method, conduct and reporting guidance, and examples of methods. And you can see here we have a note that the suggested combination of evidence synthesis methods is theoretically possible. So this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier. However, we could not locate published examples. So instead, we broke down the different components, and you can see examples of how other people have done different parts of the review. And then we also have some references related to the definitions. And in the official version of the tool, we'll also have a link to cite the different papers if you want to mention any of that in your work. We'll also have a link to the voluntary feedback survey that I mentioned. Okay, so now I'm going to hop back in to my slides so we can go through the next worked example. So in this case, a graduate student is interested in exploring caregivers' experiences of hospice dementia care. After doing a quick review of the literature, they found there are quite a few reviews on the topic. The student has asked an academic librarian for some help on how to approach the research question. So the research question in this case is, what is the experience of hospice care for informal caregivers of people living with dementia? And in this case, the student wanted to use a framework. So we're going to use SPICE. This is kind of similar to a PICO framework, but oriented more towards qualitative evidence synthesis. So going back to SPICE, so S is setting. In this case, it's inpatient hospice care for dementia. The perspective is informal caregivers of people living with dementia. The intervention or phenomena of interest is experience of hospice care. And we won't have a comparison in this case. And the evaluation is qualitative methodology. So again, we're going to go back into write review. So let's go over here. We're going to go select return to the tool. Okay, so in this case, we want to do a synthesis of qualitative data. Again, we're not going to have any comparisons. We are looking at systematic reviews only. We would like to do a qualitative synthesis. The question is fixed. We do have, we're using SPICE and there is a fixed review question. In this case, there are no theories related to the topic. We do not have expertise in qualitative research since this is a grad student. We're going to pretend we don't have any time or time or resource constraints in this case. And we're going to say, no, we don't plan on continually updating the review. So we're going to hit save again. And we got mega aggregation. So again, you can view your answers, view the definitions associated with this, conduct and reporting guidance, and some examples of the methods. So that is a little glimpse into the upcoming update of the tool. So I'm going to go back into my slides here. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so before we end off, I just wanted to add on a couple of things. So first, the limitations of Write Review. Unfortunately, it's only available in English. And it does not include an exhausted list of methods, although it is practically comprehensive because we did include methods that are also theoretically possible, although it is also possible that we missed some evidence synthesis methods. You may receive more than one suggested method, so users should read through all of the supporting material that we provide to determine which method they should proceed with, keeping the research question in mind and the objectives of the research. And then during the development process, what we're calling unexplored combinations of methods were identified and included in the tools. So these methods are methodologically possible, but may not have been conducted in the literature. So in the example that I showed, we had a living rapid review. Therefore, the user should really use their discretion when deciding to proceed with these recommendations. Again, thinking about the research question and the materials that we provide. And I also just wanted to mention that this tool is intended to serve as a general guide to help reviewers think through what methods would be useful and appropriate for their studies. And then just to end things off, just some tips and some things to keep in mind before using the tool. So the first thing is it's good to have a sense of the literature on the topic before conducting your review or using the tool. So you can do a literature search or an environmental scan. The second is to have a research question in mind. So as you saw in the examples, a research question is really needed in order to answer the questions in the tool. The third is to consider establishing your PICOs or related framework, even if this is a preliminary version. And the last tip is to really make sure you read through all the tool questions to ensure you have enough information about your planned evidence synthesis to adequately answer the questions. And if you kind of follow all of these tips, you will be able to obtain a more accurate recommendation from the tool. And then my very last slide is about the next steps and related work. So Write Review 3.0 is coming very, very soon. And I also just wanted to mention that several of our research team members are part of the Evidence Synthesis Taxonomy Initiative, which builds on our tool and will be synergistic with future updates of the Write Review tool. The initiative aims to establish a living taxonomy of evidence syntheses and has the potential to standardize terminology in this space, which is really needed. If you're interested in learning more about this initiative, there is the publication, and you can also look up Evidence Synthesis Taxonomy Initiative online. And that's all I have. Thank you so much. And just wanted to quickly acknowledge the Write Review team, Dr. Barbara Klein for the content on the Delphi study, also Drs. Andrew Ochuko, Bafam, and again, Barbara for their input on this presentation. Thank you, everyone, and I'm happy to answer any questions.